Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another episode of Play the Tape. I am your host, Derek J. Fields. Full disclaimer, we are not licensed, certified counselors, or substance use counselors. They will be up here eventually. They will, to get their perspective too, and their experiences, and their strength, and their hope of their testimonies. But today, we're focusing on just the experiences so we can share that hope to others. And with that, love and recovery and faith is possible. Today, I have a person here that I care about, good friend of mine. This person has a story that is very impactful when it comes to their mental health and things that they have experienced in their life. And I can't wait to hear what this person has to say. And I'm very, very thrilled and honored to have this person here. And I thank this person so much for coming up here. Without further ado, I want to introduce A. How you doing, A?
Hey, I'm doing pretty okay.
Good, good. Listen, thank you for being on the show today. And as you're listening or you're viewing the show, A chose to have the anonymity honored. And that's what we do here on Play the Tape. If you choose to be anonymous, you can. That means your name, your likeness, or anything that you want will be protected. Because we're here to focus on is the testimony, the story, and how recovery can and will work. So, with that being said, I want to introduce A, and the floor is yours.
Thank you for inviting me and giving me this platform to speak because these kinds of conversations tend to be held like privately, between friends behind closed doors. And it's not often that we get to talk about mental health in this way, like on a bigger step. So, thank you for providing that.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So, yeah, go ahead.
No, I was just saying, go ahead. You could start wherever you want to.
Okay. So, to condense, um, I had an extremely rough childhood, like for a long period of time. Like things were kind of crazy, and then whenever I was 8, it got really bad until I was 19. So when I was 19, I was overseas visiting my dad's family, and my mom kicked me out by email, and that was honestly the best thing that could have happened to me because I was born in the city in like Northeast, and then I also grew up really rural. That's where I went to middle and high school. So there were a lot of things that happened to me that in the moment I'm like, what the hell? But later I'm just like, wow, that was actually for my benefit that my trajectory turned that way. Because then I was able to move back to the city with my other relatives, and I was able to go to school because the nearest community college there was 3.5 hours. So, things I don't like to tell other people things happen for a reason because you don't know where they're at
Mm-hmm.
and, their own emotional with stuff. But I tend to apply that for myself. So I put myself through school. I didn't have any family support. I was homeless the whole time I went to school. It took me from 2005 to 2015 to get my undergrad and my graduate degree. And those were really intense times. Like, if you didn't work, you didn't eat. And so, you know, I got my master's and I started working in social work. And during starting teenage years and beyond, I knew that going to therapy was important for me. But in the meantime, I still went through periods where I would drink in proportions that were not good for my body. And I knew it was to escape. It wasn't social drinking. I picked up smoking weed and not advocating substance use, but that really helped with a lot of my PTSD. And it's like, it's so weird being on both sides of the table because I'm a licensed clinical person with my state,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm able to provide therapy. And with the job, basically my career, so far, therapy hasn't been the primary focus of what I'm there for, but it ends up being a side dish because I work with people who have a lot of complex social and emotional like issues and challenges. And so I end up doing therapy on the side, and I end up hearing people's stories where I'm just like, "Oh dang, me too," but I can't say that, you know?
Right.
And I'm just like, "Oh dang, I have the same problem. When you figure it out, you let me know. I can't be saying that either."
Right.
But like, yeah, so it's very interesting like being on both sides. In my course of getting to where I'm at, like educational wise, I've had to do a lot of studying of the DSM-5, which is like the diagnostic manual for mental health illnesses, and it's the most updated version. And it's not a perfect science, but it's getting better. And I have a lot of mental health diagnoses myself. Like I have anxiety, I have depression, I have PTSD. And just working with people who have all different kinds of diagnoses that just come through the hospital, and working with people also, so I work at a veteran hospital, and it's really sad to see all the regulars that come in for alcohol detox.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a few in particular, they have a cycle because they come in whenever both my teams are on call, and I'm like, what a miracle, you ended up with my team. Out of all the medicine teams, you bounce back to me. And so I see that cycle, and I've learned to see like substance use and everything that's diagnosable in the DSM as just a coping strategy for trauma. And
When you say
mhm,
cycle, what do you mean cycle? What do you mean cycle? That explain cycle.
like,
Mm-hmm.
so the one person that I'm thinking of, every time they come in, we try to get them linked up to the substance use program
Mm-hmm.
in Temple. And we can edit that last part out if we're able to.
Yeah.
Because I just like outed my location. Um, but yeah, we try to get him linked up to the substance use program that's local. And we're all like, all right, you're going to start in like 3 days. You're going to discharge home. He doesn't show up. Within 5 days, he comes back, and he is like, his blood alcohol level is through the roof. And it's just like, he can't go
Mm.
home without drinking. He can't. Like, he asks to be discharged straight to the facility, but that's not always something that can be coordinated because, of their bed availability and the program,
Right.
when they're able to receive him and all that. So he's stuck in this cycle, and he seems to be telling himself that he has no power in it. And maybe he doesn't feel like he hasn't the right supports. Maybe this isn't the right time for him. And he needs to keep going in his cycle until something like a bike, it's just going to keep going until the brakes are applied, which he doesn't seem to recognize he has brakes, or like a stick gets, stuck in one of the spokes, and then he falls out of his pattern by force. But it seems to be like the way he's going, it's going to be an external force and not internal. And it's
Mm.
sad
Yes.
because I see it as an illness. Like, I know it's not, because I tell my patients when they tell me about their substance use, I'm like, thank you for telling me, because it's not something that's easy to talk about. And nobody ever wakes up like, the sun is shining and the birds are singing. I think I'm going to start a meth habit today. Like,
Right.
no one ever does that.
Right.
It's always a result of physical or emotional pain.
It's a symptom. It's a symptom of trauma. It's
Yeah, it's a coping
a coping
mechanism,
mechanism.
but
Right. Hmm.
you want to stop the pain, and that's normal. That's not something crazy to ask for. But
Mm.
I tell people, I'm glad you had this when you needed it, but it's also like a spare tire. You cannot ride on it forever. You have to replace it with something else, something more sustainable. And I try to apply that to myself with my substances. Like, I smoke weed, and lately, like, I'll have periods where I drink more than I should. So, like, I'm working through my own stuff, but I'm still going to therapy, and I'm making efforts in my own mental health to try to, like, curb that. I've reduced my smoking greatly. I don't smoke anywhere near as I did before in all my past years. So that's kind of a, a brief summary of the things that I've learned through myself and through other people, through my education, and then kind of where I'm at right now. If you
Would
have
you?
questions.
Yeah. So, you talked about you knew uh, when you were going to college um, that you needed therapy. When did you start actually reaching out for therapy? And so two questions. When did you start reaching out for therapy at that time? If you did, and was there any hesitation? Were you scared? Were you hesitant?
So it's interesting that you asked that. So when I was younger, my first contact with therapy was mandated, and I'm glad because I was a kid and I didn't know what kind of help I needed. I just knew I needed help. And my family, you know, having their generations of trauma passed down, was not familiar with therapy. That's like crazy people or whatever it is that they say.
Right.
And so when I was 15, that was my first more dramatic and like intensive attempt at suicide, like trigger warning. But that landed me in the hospital, and I was there for 3 days. It was too late for them to try to pump my stomach, so we had to just like hope that whatever was passing through my system wasn't going to harm me too much. Like, they got out as much as they could, and I was not having a good time, and I really thought I was going to die. Like, the nurses were like, we really don't know what's going to happen, and I was just like, oh snap. Like, but it was like that was just years and years of pain, and I couldn't deal with it anymore. So that was my first exposure to therapy, and
Hmm.
honestly, my first therapist sucked. Like, we sat there, like, she's like, all right, so I see you're like the oldest of a lot of kids. And I'm like, yeah. And she's like, and your mom is a single mom. And I'm like, yeah. And she's like, what about your dad? I was like, I don't want to talk about that. She's like, well, we need to. And so we spent the next 40 minutes in silence.
Mm.
And then I got into the car, and my mom was like, what'd you talk about? I was like, nothing. She's like, did you talk about me? And I was like, no. She's like, what'd you talk about? I said, literally nothing. She's like, you can't tell me you sat there in silence that whole time. I said, well, believe it.
Right.
And so, yeah. And so I stopped seeing her, and then thankfully I got linked up to another one when I was able to start driving on my own. And she was such a much better fit for me. Like, and I realized through the years that, unfortunately, finding a therapist that fits your personality and your needs is like speed dating. Like, you'll know
Mm-hmm.
in the first 2 sessions if y'all are gonna vibe. Are they judgmental? If you make like offhanded jokes, are they gonna be like, oh wow, what a weirdo? Like, you know, and also with the understanding that no one can make you be committed, unless you're going to, you've expressed harm with a plan to yourself or somebody else. So, like, other than that, can't be put somewhere against your will.
Right. With that attempt at 15 and that experience, and as you grew up, um, for you, do you think therapy is a resource that isn't utilized as much as it should be from both sides, coming from the mental health conditions that you have and being in the career that you are, seeing it from both sides? Is therapy, for your experience, for you, something that you would recommend or worked for you?
So, that is kind of a complex question because I do feel that not enough people are getting access to it like they should,
Mm-hmm.
but is the accessibility there? Because those two experiences I talked about were before I was 19. And so when I moved to a different state and didn't have insurance and I was a student, if I didn't have campus services, like, I don't know, I'd probably have like 3 community resources. And this has been emphasized like all throughout my social work career.
Mm-hmm.
Like, even with insurance, like, I have a major insurance right now, and I've had another major insurance before. The copay on the other insurance, who can spend like $85 per session, and you have a lot of stuff to process.
Right.
I'm not money bags, but like, and then finding a therapist that accepts your insurance, and then there's all this insurance fuckery that just goes on, like, yeah. So accessibility, and then being able to access it even with the means, and then also the stigma surrounding therapy and people's past experiences with therapists. So yeah.
No, I agree with you. As a veteran, as someone who's dealt with traumatic events, adverse childhood effects, um, uh, 2 combat tours, and the bureaucracy and the red tape that comes to insurance, that comes to finding a therapist that's not looking at you as another number or looking at their clock or reading from a script or being robotic, and then dealing with all that you have to deal through when it, like you said, when it comes to the insurance. Then when you find someone that you can let down your walls, things happen. Insurances change, people leave, people retire. And I hear you. I agree with you wholeheartedly. So what do you think could be done? Do you have a solution or maybe an idea of something that could be done where people, like you said, that don't have that $85 per session, or not money bags, because neither am I, but want that accessibility where they have this resource that they can use to talk to people, to communicate with people, to get that support and the advocacy for their mental health?
So the way I see systems and the world, I I understood in grad school that truly, like, so micro, meso, and macro, those refer to the 3 different levels, like, of community. And so
Mm-hmm.
micro would be like one-on-one, meso would be like engaging with communities, and then macro would be like more the bigger picture, like policy. And honestly, it's going to have to be through policy that these things are changed, because the system is so broken. There ain't enough duct tape to like bridge the gaps.
You got that right. And they don't even have local treatment facilities, brick and mortars anymore, like they used to back in the day, where someone like you and me could go and to a local facility or a local counseling facility to get the help that we need, even if we didn't have insurance or we had what you would say lowbrow insurance. So um, I'm with you when it comes to policy would have to change, but people would have to stand up and, like you say, not be worried about stigma. And I think that's a big thing when it comes to therapy and counseling, that people are afraid of, that stigma, that perception of, or he's crazy, she's crazy, what's going on, the chatter, the whispering.
But also another thing that I hear from a lot of people
Hmm.
is that they don't have time because they are so busy working their 40 plus hours. I know one of my friends, she really, really wants to do therapy, but if she's not working, she's like full taking care of her like child with disabilities.
Mm,
So like even having the supports and society, and that's why I'm saying policy, because other things would need to change. Like
right.
if people were able to earn livable income, that's a stressor that would impact, like lessening that stressor would impact so many other social and cultural aspects, that are directly linked to people's depression
Hmm.
and anxiety. So I mean, that's why I'm saying policy is where it's at.
Right.
Like it's good for people to get engaged in these things, but some of the reasons why they need to engage are because of the other things that need to be impacted on a policy level.
On a bigger scale. Right. Right. And that would trickle down to the community and then to the one-on-one, like you said. I definitely agree with the whole policy um, influence. I want to ask you, for you, does treatment help to go, if you can access it and if you have the time, does treatment work for you? Is it something that you can turn to if you need to? Is it a resource for you, or is it a couple different things? Is it treatment? Is it counseling? And is it medication? What works for A?
So I'm going to tell you first two things that I wish that I wasn't in like supervision to have
Mm-hmm.
to learn this, but there's like two different levels of therapy. And it what the type there's like short-term therapy, and then there's like long-term therapy. And you're with a long-term therapist when they're giving you homework to do at home, because that's supposed to help start the change of your foundation of thinking. I spent a long time going to different short-term therapists, and I was wondering why like it still felt like I was carrying all this hurt. So when I finally found like a psychiatrist,
Mm-hmm.
and there's LCSWs that do this too, where they, have their methods and theories that they're able to apply to get down deep, like it's scary, but it's the important work that needs to be done. And so for me, that kind of work helps. And also medication management. So seeing like psychiatry for medication for my depression, and then for my anxiety, that helps to keep things more at bay. So my depression is like less likely to get out of hand because it's chemical imbalance, or my anxiety isn't going to be like 1,000, galloping wild horses because I'm not taking my daily, maintenance medication.
Right.
So for me, both of those things work. I know medication's not for everybody,
Mm-hmm.
but therapy, like, because medication is the band-aid. It's supposed to help, you know, bring you bring your chemicals to a more balanced baseline because you've been in your anxious or depression state for so long that your body has learned a new, you know, baseline. And so the chemicals, that you're adding to your body are to help bring you back to a more sustainable baseline where you can manage. But therapy is, going into the root of the problem and trying to untangle it. So I tell people, because I've met a lot of people who only take meds, but
Hmm.
they don't go to therapy. And I'm like, okay, you're just slapping a Band-Aid on it, and you're going to have to change out that Band-Aid, but you're not getting to the root of the problem, to where
Have,
the healing can start.
have you seen it the opposite way? Have you seen people that go to therapy but don't take medication? Have you
Yeah.
seen that? Okay. 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 'Cause I know for me, I had to get stable. Like you said, I had to get this, I had to get that stability, get back to my baseline, my homeostasis. I had to get back to my baseline so that I can go to therapy. I can go to counseling. I can be in a community of people, of like-minded people, that my peers that can support me. And then I can see this psychiatrist or this therapist that can give me different coping skills or different methods or different ways to look at my trauma or things that are life on life terms that are affecting me, my depression and my anxiety. So I, that's what I needed. And then because when I first found out about PTSD, I was very angry, a lot of rage, didn't understand it. Then I had to get my medication to get stable so I could focus on the tools that I was being taught for Derek. I know that doesn't work. So if someone comes and they're saying that they're doing therapy and not medication, you said medicine and no therapy is a band-aid, but what is therapy and no medication? What is that?
That is, I mean, not everybody necessarily needs medication.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, it's kind of meeting people where they're at. Because
Gotcha.
some people, they're able to, like, see, they don't feel in the depths of despair, but it's just like, man, I've had the big sads for a while, and I don't have the energy like I used to. Like, they're able to function,
Mm-hmm.
but they still feel some kind of way. Like, they still should go to therapy, and that's part of why, in this society and culture that we live in right now, like, the most guaranteed access you have to healthcare is when it's a crisis,
Right.
and then
Yep.
you have to go to a mental health hospital
Mm-hmm.
because they'll take you without insurance. But it's like, why did I have to get to this point to be able to be seen?
Right. To be seen and to be heard. Absolutely.
Yeah, so you
Absolutely.
don't have to wait until you're at the point where you know, it gets bad enough to be able to see. Like, if you're feeling some kind of way, like, go. There's people that been in a car accident and they need to go to therapy to talk about it because that's a traumatic event.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. Yeah, I tell people, I said PTSD and depression does not just exclusively for the military. You can have post traumatic stress disorder for, like you said, a car wreck, firefighters being abused physically, mentally, being bullied, being picked on. Like PTSD is a traumatic event that happens and it changes the chemical in your brain. And it's okay to say that I'm not okay and I need someone to talk to. And that's what we're trying to do here at Play the Tape. And with my guest A, we're trying to suggest through our experiences that it's okay. It's okay to go to therapy. It's okay to get help. And now they got telehealth. So what are your thoughts about telehealth when it comes to the mental health side of things? Where, hey, if I want to stay anonymous, I can go outside of the state, I can go outside of the county, you know, I can be in South Dakota and I can have a counselor or a therapist in California. So my anonymity is honored. What do you think? What are your thoughts about telehealth and counseling in that way?
So that also is a complex issue
Mm-hmm.
because telehealth as a platform, I've started because I used to go to therapy face to face, and then whenever COVID hit, it turned to telehealth. And I actually enjoy telehealth a little better
Mm-hmm.
because of the convenience. And then also, I feel a little less bad when I'm crying because I'm not like crying in someone else's space. I'm crying in my own safe space,
Right.
even though there's a video.
Right.
Um, but on the flip side of that telehealth discussion, um, there's a lot. So the psychiatrists that I see, they're through like a local health system. So I know that they are a person here locally. There are websites that shall not be named that are an exclusive online platform, which is different from finding a local person in your area that will provide telehealth services. Like you log in, they link you up with anybody, and those I have some hesitation about that as, both a therapist or someone that's able to provide therapy
Mm-hmm.
and someone that receives it, because those have such a high turnover rate for therapists. They don't treat them well, and then that's going to impact your health care as, you know, a patient when you keep having to switch therapists, and all therapists have different modalities and different levels of commitment and different vibes. Like I had to go through that online part to get access to medications that were really difficult to get a hold of, even though I had a diagnosis for it, but because I'm an adult. And I'm like, what the heck? Like, just my local system with my crappy insurance was being a barrier to my own healthcare. So I had to go online, provide my legitimate prescription,
Mm-hmm.
and then I was able to get it like once. And then the psychiatrist, she bounced. And then they were like trying to get me linked up to another one. And that was taking a while. But then I was able to fix stuff like here locally so that I was able to get back on my medication again.
Well, you
But there's just,
discover. Oh, go ahead.
mhm.
Sorry. Go ahead, A.
Yeah, no, I was like, that can be a hot mess. There's high turnover, and that will impact your care.
Were you discouraged? Were you a little discouraged with that? A little annoyed, or because I can understand. oh, The reason I'm asking is because there's a lot of people that deal with that on a daily basis that aren't as they're not as far in the journey of their recovery or in the journey of as of being aware as you are. So I know with dealing with all that could frustrate someone and discourage them from even trying again. So were you discouraged? Did you feel like you wanted to give up, or you knew that you had to find someone for yourself to get the needs met for A?
There were so many times in that journey that I felt really discouraged, and I was really angry and very frustrated because even when trying to get like meeting new therapists, and I will never forget this man.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it was when I had to change I had to change psychiatry offices because my person was retiring and they weren't hiring anyone to replace her. And I'm like, I work at a hospital. It's a different one that I work now, but I'm like, I work at a hospital. I receive my care here. Y'all are championing how you guys are like super big, with their focus on mental health.
Mm-hmm.
And I receive my care through their offices, and then they can't even replace someone who's retiring, and then they're referring me out to the community. And so like in the community, I the person that I was referred out to, they told me to bring all my meds, and I did. And there was a medication that I was taking, and it said on the label for PTSD. And so he's like, "Oh, you have PTSD?" I said, "Yes, because my name is on the bottle. My
Mm-hmm.
diagnosis is on the bottle, and the
Mm-hmm.
medication name is on the bottle.
Right.
And that's on my problem list." And then he's like, "Oh, when did you serve?" And I said, "I didn't." And then he's like, "Why do you have PTSD?"
Mm-hmm.
And so I happened to be going through it at the time. Like, my PTSD was really bad. And I had an experience right in my back pocket that I pulled out. And I didn't even realize that I had like zoned out while I was talking about it until I realized that parts of the floor were coming back into my vision. When I looked up at him, he looked so fucking uncomfortable. I was like, I hope you have a therapist to go talk about this to.
Yep.
'Cause you look traumatized. And this
Yep.
is what you get for asking me, why do you have PTSD?
And A made a good point. Your therapist should have a therapist. It works that
Yes.
way. It's they're supposed to. It just like they should. A made a great point. And yeah, we that's what I'm saying. Like we spoke about that. That it's more than just being in the military. PTSD affects people every day that have not
In the
served
community.
e- everywhere. Everywhere. You don't have to be in the military. You don't have to be a first responder. You can just be living and have a PTSD, a post traumatic stress
Do we have
moment.
do we have time to talk about epigenetics?
Yeah, go for it. Yes,
Okay,
absolutely.
good. Yes, because this is something that did a lot of I heard about it like in passing, and then I did my own like peer reviewed research on it.
Hmm.
And so from from a medical standpoint, epigenetics is explained in that any kind of like biological change or adaptation is going to last at least 3 generations. And so an example would be, say, a boy and a girl grew up during a Great Depression. They were raised during that time, they get married, they have children. All their children have a way higher propensity of being born smaller and growing up to be smaller in stature because through their parents' struggles, their genes, it's been passed down in their genes to be prepared for a possible like depression for scarcity of food, so that's why their bodies are a little smaller. And even if those kids grow up eating better and stuff, their kids, the grandkids, still have a higher chance of being born smaller in stature because they've been prepped by the genes of the grandparents. And so it takes 3 cycles for something to be able to have a chance to like come out. And so I've recognized with that like biological education in mind
Hmm.
that trauma really does get passed down, and it does get passed down in the body. And it's interesting because your genetics like can allow you to have a higher chance of getting depression under the right circumstances because you already have the like if your family has depression, anxiety, or these other medical or mental health diagnoses under the right conditions, that'll pop out of your body. And
Wow.
so
No, go ahead. I was just saying wow because
yeah,
you're
yeah,
making me think. Okay, so being predisposed, even with depression and anxiety, you can even say that when it comes to substance use because it's
yes.
there, it's there,
And
and
there's studies that show it with like native indigenous peoples, with Mexican American, family, like those cultures, you see it that there's a genetic predisposition for that.
hmm yes, and then you couple that with your, so you have the predisposed, then it has to happen. Some traumatizing event can trigger, and then you're there. You're in the depression. You're in the anxiety. You're in the substance use. Now you're trying to cope. And now you're trying to live your life, not understanding what has happened to you or what's happening to you because there's no one to educate. Interesting. Interesting. Because I've heard that in therapy, I've heard that taught to me that because of my genes, what I was predisposed to, and the timing triggered not only my mental health, my PTSD and my depression, but triggered the learned behavior of survival using not just substances, but things to cope,
Yes.
to escape.
And especially if you're coming from that pattern of generations where it's not acknowledged, it's not treated. And
Mm-hmm.
so in this day and age, with, better access to information, whether it's accurate or not, but also access to other people and being able to cast a wider network of support, because it doesn't have to be, your neighbor down the street because you got the payphone, or
Right.
the cell phone the size of a big old sneaker, like
Mm-hmm.
we have the internet. And so you're able to better understand some of what you're going through. Like, I have a friend that he got a vasectomy when he was in his 20s because all he knew was that he was messed up, and he saw those same traits in his family, and he did not understand what it was. He just knew that, like, in his words, my family is really fucked up, and I did not want to bring a child into the world and have them get involved in this mess. And it wasn't until like maybe like 2 years ago, he got a diagnosis of bipolar 2. And he said that at first he was like in denial and he didn't want to accept it because there's a lot of stigma around that diagnosis. And
It is.
even within, unfortunately, there's stigmas even within the mental health community. So I was really glad that he was able to get linked up to a mental health provider that didn't have that. And so he was able to get treatment. He takes his medications regularly. He was going to therapy. He said it explained so much about him. He realized a lot of unhealthy patterns and behaviors that his family had, but he had to like go way outside of himself to be able to find those answers. And so whenever you're coming from that pattern and you're just like waking up, like, what the heck? Like, what am I doing? What are we doing? How come no one ever explained any of this? And then whenever you get your diagnosis and you get your treatment plan, and then it feels like some people, because their families might be kind of stuck in those patterns, they feel like they're doing this journey on their own, like they're breaking free from their people to go on this journey. And that's a whole other thing, and I've seen where some people are like, you know what? I'm sorry that we've had this cycle, and I'm sorry that we've put you through it, but we're going to work together as a family, and I'm just like, bless. Like, this is the best case scenario, but
Awesome. We got 10 minutes and I'm with you. That I am, for me, trying to break my cycle that I saw. And then I know my dad saw and his dad saw. So I'm trying to, for my children, not perfect and not claiming to be. I have my faults, but I'm owning them. I'm not sweeping them under the rug. I'm not doing it to keep a certain perception from others. I want to be an advocate for people and a voice for people that need hope when they think hope is not there, because I was like that. I was a hopeless person. I didn't think hope existed. I didn't think I would ever get out of the hell that I was in. But we strive and we pursue, and we're here doing this, being advocates, being voice to the voiceless, giving support. Wanted to ask you, I know for me, one-on-one therapy is great, but I love community. I love group. I love being able to connect with someone just like me, and seeing and learning what they did or did not do. What are your thoughts about that as group? We talked a lot about one on one, but let's just share for a little bit. What do you think about that group dynamic when it comes to therapy?
So, when it comes to therapy, group is very beneficial, but I have a really good friend that works with veterans directly mental health. That is her straight up like job, and she's done group. And she had an instance where someone came to group and they showed up angry and triggered, and they were not ready for that. Like they needed to work on some of their stuff one on one before
Hmm.
being able to go into the bigger, spectrum of community, because it wasn't even group, that like it was just coping skills. You were asked specifically not to bring up traumatic events because it wasn't that kind of group. There was not going to be that kind of support, and
Right.
she already showed up triggered just to learn about coping mechanisms. So like you have to figure out your own comfort and your own progress and being real with yourself, because group can be helpful and therapeutic, but it's only helpful and therapeutic if you're ready for it, and there's nothing wrong with you if you're not. That's just where you are on your journey.
Um, Good. I've heard in that self advocacy that you're gonna have to sometimes advocate for yourself, meaning you're gonna have to may do some research on always reach out to someone licensed and certified. Do your due diligence when you're researching that person. And like A said, it may take one or two or three people before you find the right fit. Absolutely. But also advocate. What I heard from that is advocate for yourself. If you know that you're not at a specific point in your journey and you need one-on-one before you can go into group, or you might need group, then you get to your one-on-one. Be an advocate for yourself too. That's what I heard. Am I right?
Yeah, like meet yourself where you're at
Mm-hmm.
and embrace it, because everybody has to start their journey from somewhere. And every journey starts with one step. And it's normal in your journey that you might backtrack a little bit. You might turn the map upside down, get a little lost, or maybe like some big unexpected things come up on your path. And that's okay too.
Right. Right now, we got a few minutes left. Give me a couple things that worked for you in your journey to get you right here where you are.
Um, so I recently had this conversation with myself about learning better what's my stuff to deal with and what is other people's stuff that they brought to my table and is not rightfully mine. Like, I
Mm,
cannot manage other people's emotions. I cannot read other people's minds. If other people are upset with me or they're acting some kind of way, and I've asked them if everything is okay and they tell me yes, but they're still acting not normal, I can't stress about that. I can't, it's all in their court now. I have to wait for that communication and when they're ready. And then meeting myself where I'm at, like being honest with myself about my own progress and my own mental health, and like boundaries. Like, because that's how you're able to like create that space within yourself to learn how to depend on yourself and know that you are a safe person, and your body is a safe place.
I like how you said that. Listen, I got to keep my side of the street clean before I can help anyone else. And that if I ask you, "Are you okay?" and you're still acting a little off, I've done my part. I can't take on the responsibilities of others. In that regard, their emotional responsibilities, because you have your own. And I think that's very well said, because I used to do that. I used to want to not only take on the responsibilities of my emotional state, but others as well. I've learned that I have to put, like you said, boundaries and borders, because self-care is very important. And that's what I'm hearing you are at right now, is self-care for A, and making sure that A needs are met before A can help anyone else. And I agree with that. You have to be able to know where you are, be aware of where you are, and be okay with asking for help. It's okay. I ask for help every day because I need it, and I'm okay with it. And there's no shame. There's no shame. A can tell you there's no shame. When you need to reach out, you reach out. So anything else you want to share, A, while I got you?
I mean, it's kind of like if you've ever been on an airplane, they tell you that if there's an emergency, you have to put like and the air masks drop down, you have to put it on yourself before you even turn to put it on the baby next to you. Because if you pass out on the way trying to put it on the baby, none of y'all are going to get help. And so it's the same for yourself. Like, even if it feels like there's a lot of people relying on you, can they rely on you if you're not okay, if you're not even able to sustain yourself? And I understand, I'm talking about like even if you have kids, like, and you don't have a lot of support, like, don't be scared to try to reach out, because honestly, you might be in your head more than what you realize, and there's a lot more people that like care about you.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. But listen, A, this has been great and very informative. And I thank you for coming up here and giving a different look, giving both sides of the same coin, because that's what I call it. It's the same side. It's the same coin and the same size. And I thank you for that. I thank you for being a guest up here and sharing your experience, strength, and hope, and educating people a little bit that it's okay and what they should look out for and what worked for you and what didn't work for you. And you can always come up here again whenever you want, because there's a lot of things that we can dive into, more questions, more coping skills, more methods, more support out there. So I thank you, A, for being up here today. I really appreciate that.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Okay, well, we'll catch up with you next time. I'll talk to you later. Okay, thank you for being up here. You have a blessed day.
Definitely, you too. Bye.
Listen, this has been a really good episode. All the episodes are good, but listen, we on Play the Tape, we're here to be advocates for you, to show you that there are people that care and will jump in that hole with you because they know the way out. We're not just surviving, we are survivors, but we're living moment by moment, day by day. To have peace comes understanding. With understanding comes love. With love comes faith. And with faith comes hope. And with hope comes recovery. Listen, if ain't nobody told you today that they love you, we love you. I love you. That's what we do here at Play the Tape. We're being of service to you. We hope, and we are hope. We all are hope. We love you. God bless. Until next time, peace.